culture until you no longer know how to interact. You don't know how to engage with the truth. You don't know how to be honest. Because again, as I say, truth is not just about the words you say. It's a posture of your soul itself. Truth begins long before your tongue ever moves, before the mind ever starts assembling the words to say. Honesty is a covenant inside your heart. It's a willingness to face reality as it is, because you know that you will eventually face the one who made reality. And when that covenant is broken, the lies that you speak, that's just the leakage. That's why the problem isn't just propaganda. Propaganda is just a tool. It's an outgrowth of an already existing dishonest culture, of a culture that already does not value the truth or even recognize that there is such a thing. The deeper disease is a moral habit. It's a moral habit that trains a person to treat reality as optional. Moral relativism, you know. It sounds academic. Like I said, it's beginner level nihilism. Nothing matters. And that creates a sort of safe house of ambiguity where nothing is actually binding. No truth is strong enough to actually restrain your urges and instincts and appetites. No meaning is heavy enough to cause you to submit and discipline yourself. So in that fog, deception doesn't feel like deception anymore. It's just an alternative perspective. That's the confusion they create. And accountability, again, just becomes another word game, a point-scoring debate. You dodge and deflect and evade, you know. You throw counter punches, you throw curveballs, or what have you. Anything that you can do, if you can obscure the truth, if you can make the point of a discussion get lost in the quagmire of all your, you know, non sequiturs, your red herrings, your straw men, then you win. If you do that, you win. You actually believe in a form of engagement in which it is possible to win against the truth, against reality. You think if you can dazzle and you can distract and you can confuse until the truth gets sidelined, that means you win. And if you win, then that means that whatever you said to win is true. You're validated when your lie wins an argument, as if winning an argument makes what you said true, makes it not a lie. Do you understand? But that's how you think. That's how the West thinks. This is how estranged and alienated and disconnected you are from reality. How disconnected your culture has made you from reality.
Now, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your viewership, because this is a channel whereby we articulate issues that are affecting the general populace of this world. Now, today I bring across this bold man who has always been admirable on how he brings across issues and factors that are so much important in shaping this world and how the world should take shape. So he talks about the kind of crafty measures that the Western culture have placed through their deceitful means of ensuring that the world is skewed towards favoring their interests. According to Bolsen, all that the Western or the whites plan is to ensure that they remain in control for the longest time possible. And this control is achieved by segregating other regions and oppressive measures that are so much detrimental on the development of other regions. So as he brings this video, I want you to take a keen interest on the points he raises and see if he really touches or expose how the proxies are used to ensure that their deceit, their lies are advanced towards achieving their interest. So let us watch this, and we will have a comment in the end. And if you're watching us for the first time, I urge you to make a subscription, because here is where we discuss these issues openly, and here is where we will fight to get that equality that we have deserved for the longest time possible. So let us watch and make a comment in the end.
Yes, I've said that many times. Westerners can't tell the truth. Okay, so let's talk about how and why they can't tell the truth. I've said it many times. Westerners are incapable of honesty. They're incapable of telling the truth. I I've explained many times. I'm not saying it's deliberate. It's not necessarily on purpose, no. You know, that would be like, literally like saying someone who has no legs is on purpose not playing basketball. You understand? I'm talking about incapability, not deliberate intentional dishonesty. I mean, obviously there are plenty of people who are just straight up liars out of the West and everywhere else, but I'm not talking about them. I'm saying that honesty is not their language in the West. Truth is not a dialect that they speak. They don't know how to speak that language. I know people get mad when I say that, but understand, I'm actually telling you something that has been done to you. I'm telling you something that you have been deprived of. You understand? I'm telling you something that you're a victim of by your culture, by your so-called civilization. They victimized you in this way. This is the most graphic and the most literal form of kufr, of kufar, covering up, concealing, burying the truth. And this is all they do. It's the only language they know. Truly, this is the only language they know. And this is why everyone around the world is quickly coming to the conclusion that you simply can't be engaged with. The Westerners simply can't be engaged with. It's just not productive. It's not productive. It's not useful in any way whatsoever to engage with you. Like I've said before, in these interactions, no communication ever actually takes place when we talk to you, when people in the global south talk to you, when Muslims talk to you. And that's a shame. It's a shame what has been done to you, but it has been done to you. It's a shame what you've been deprived of as a human being. This dysfunction that has infected, intergenerational dysfunction that has been inflicted on your culture. Now, of course, some of what I'm talking about could be dismissed as their ignorance or their misunderstanding, you know, or some sort of a personality disorder, like you can't pay attention, you have ADHD or what have you, or you're aggressive, you have a problem with your temper and so forth, and this is why you can't be engaged with it, why there can't be productive, normal, healthy, rational conversations with you. But for me, I characterize all of these behaviors under the overarching label of dishonesty, because that's how it pans out. That's the practical impact. That's the practical outcome. You know, you inject falsehood, you muddy the waters of discourse, you distract, you derail, you deny, you deflect, you sidestep. You know, you bring in irrelevancies into the conversation. You bring in fake issues. You do anything and everything. Wallahi, you do anything and everything to try to stop honest discussion. You always try to obscure reality by hook or by crook. And so the practical impact of all of that, that all comes out to the same practical impact as if you were just lying. I mean, it goes much deeper than just false narratives. It's deeper than propaganda. We're actually talking about a culturally ingrained reflex against truth. A culturally ingrained reflex against true and honest discourse. This is a civilizational pathology. And in fact, it comes down to foundational morality, you see, because you have that insistence on moral relativism, which is nothing but nihilism for beginners. It means ambiguity, moral ambiguity. They're morally agnostic, you understand? That's the heart of their dishonesty. Because honesty, truthfulness, it's not just about words. This isn't just about what you say or what you don't say. Dishonesty isn't just calculated lying or deception. You know, honesty is not actually fundamentally an intellectual, or it doesn't originate in the intellectual sphere, if you understand what I mean. Because before you choose to distort reality through deception, you know, before you string together words to speak a lie or to obscure the truth, you have in your heart already rejected reality and in fact the creator of reality and your inevitable meeting with that creator when you will be held account for whatever you say and what you don't say. You have imagined in your heart that you can actually weave an alternative reality. You can create your own fictional world, and that this fictional world is possible for you to somehow superimpose that upon the objective truth of the real world, and then you get to operate in your own version of the world according to your own rules, and you think that you can get away with it. You have internally convinced yourself that truth doesn't matter. So lies aren't lies. They're just equally valid alternative versions of reality. But existence is not a narrative. I said it's a civilizational reflex because it's both ingrained in the culture and because I think you can trace it back. You can trace how it grew out of the conditions, like I've talked about many times in Europe, in the West. You know, centuries of hard winters, thin soil, volatile harvests, recurrent scarcity. That trained whole societies to survive first and justify later. Dishonesty is a trademark of being completely dunya-centric, or what you can call materialistic, meaning that you are inordinately concerned with material things, with material survival, with accumulating resources, and so on. Very Western. When material well-being feels threatened, then truth just becomes negotiable. You start to make up the rules as you go, to get what you want and not feel that you've done anything wrong. You want to be able to get what you want and not feel that you did anything wrong in doing so. Europe went for long stretches of history inside that sort of pressure cooker, environmental pressure cooker, low fertility soils in the north, repeated food crises, and so forth. Literally centuries of bad weather. This isn't folklore. This is the climatic and agrarian record of Europe, from the Little Ice Age and its, the agricultural shocks of that, to the grim sequence of famines from 1315 and onwards, rotted crops, starving livestock, and so forth. They had a rough existence. I'm not kidding. And in my opinion, they resented that. Under those conditions, a pattern set in, mentally, spiritually. First, normalize getting by through extraction. If the crops fail, then you raid the next village. You pivot to raiding, pivot to external predation. This wasn't born out of adventurism. Scholars of European history describe all of the pressures that they were under, the resource limits, demographic problems, political opportunities. That catalyzed the Viking turn to organized acquisition abroad. That's what made them do that. The method was violence, but the ethic was necessity, their version of necessity. The narrative was glory. See, that template, the template of basically externalizing the solutions to internal scarcity, this became a very durable habit, and it became your culture. You even did there was even a domestic version of extraction. Enclosing the commons. They were fenced off. Customary rights were dissolved, and it was all done according to the language or the rhetoric of improvement. They laundered the dispossession of the people with the rhetoric of productivity and efficiency. It was a new moral grammar in which legality could sanctify harm, and policy language, or the language of policy, could bury the truth. Case histories from England show how communal governance of the land was completely dismantled, and peasant rights were extinguished under these banners of productivity and efficiency and order, and so on. Once that moral software was written at home, well, they exported it. Mercantilism that framed the whole world as a finite treasure chest to be seized and to be hoarded. The point was not reciprocity, it was extraction. Extraction justified as national strength. This is the textbook doctrine of early modern Europe. Monopolize trade, bar rivals, drain the peripheries, and called all of that prosperity. Language did the heavy lifting on that, recoding seizure as commerce and subjugation as civilization. Well, they've been lying for a long, long time. And they've been dishonest before they could even write it down. And they never got honest. This is what I'm telling you. If you move on to the modern era, well, obviously you have the emergence of what we know today as propaganda. During the First World War, America, they built a whole system. They built a whole government department for shaping public opinion. It was called the Committee on Public Information. And they pioneered methods of propaganda. They pioneered methods of indoctrination, really of brainwashing, that would later even be used by the Nazis. Okay, so this was sort of the, you can say, the official beginning in the U.S. of state corporate orchestration of public sentiment. Out of that milieu came someone like Edward Bernays and the concept of engineering consent. He understood that mass psychology could supersede public deliberation of individuals. And then you had someone like Walter Lippmann, who suggested that slogans could replace actual thinking processes. The technique matured, not only to sell products, but to sell versions of reality. If you don't know about Edward Bernays, you should look him up. He was quite ingenious. He was the epitome of an evil genius, diabolical. By the 1980s, you created what they called in academia the incredulity towards meta-narratives, which is just a sophisticated way of saying that there is no binding story. There's no final account. There's no objective truth. There's no overarching reality. There's only language games and power. But if truth is just a contest over the framing of narratives, then what's conscience? Conscience has lost any coherent meaning in that worldview. You have intellectualized a rationalization for just being the way that you've always been. It's just like shoot first and ask questions later, right? Act first, then after you've acted, weave your rationale afterwards. But what I'm saying is truth does exist. Reality exists. The real world exists. The action is what it is in reality. And no narrative is ever going to be able to change the nature of that action, nor the consequences of that action, because the truth is real. But the point is, you've been doing this for centuries. You've been doing it for millennia, and it has become a pathology. That pathology has become your culture. Until you no longer know how to interact. You don't know how to engage with the truth. You don't know how to be honest. Because again, as I say, truth is not just about the words you say. It's a posture of your soul itself. Truth begins long before your tongue ever moves, before the mind ever starts assembling the words to say. Honesty is a covenant inside your heart. It's a willingness to face reality as it is, because you know that you will eventually face the one who made reality. And when that covenant is broken, the lies that you speak, that's just the leakage. That's why the problem isn't just propaganda. Propaganda is just a tool. It's an outgrowth of an already existing dishonest culture, of a culture that already does not value the truth or even recognize that there is such a thing. The deeper disease is a moral habit. It's a moral habit that trains a person to treat reality as optional. Moral relativism, you know. It sounds academic. Like I said, it's beginner level nihilism. Nothing matters. And that creates a sort of safe house of ambiguity where nothing is actually binding. No truth is strong enough to actually restrain your urges and instincts and appetites. No meaning is heavy enough to cause you to submit and discipline yourself. So in that fog, deception doesn't feel like deception anymore. It's just an alternative perspective. That's the confusion they create. And accountability, again, just becomes another word game, a point-scoring debate. You dodge and deflect and evade, you know. You throw counter punches, you throw curveballs, or what have you. Anything that you can do, if you can obscure the truth, if you can make the point of a discussion get lost in the quagmire of all your, non sequiturs, your red herrings, your straw men, then you win. If you do that, you win. You actually believe in a form of engagement in which it is possible to win against the truth, against reality. You think if you can dazzle and you can distract and you can confuse until the truth gets sidelined, that means you win. And if you win, then that means that whatever you said to win is true. You're validated when your lie wins an argument, as if winning an argument makes what you said true, makes it not a lie. Do you understand? But that's how you think. That's how the West thinks. This is how estranged and alienated and disconnected you are from reality. How disconnected your culture has made you from reality. I mean, look at the sequence. Before anyone crafts a false argument, something inside them has already decided that the outcome matters more than the truth, meaning winning the argument by hook or by crook, that matters more than what's actually real and what's actually true. Reflect on that. You know how dangerous that is? Do you know how dangerous of a position that is to take? That's a theological position. You think that you're living in a reality where you will not be audited. You understand? This dismisses the day of judgment when speech and silence are both going to be evidence for you or against you. Listen, this is what I've talked about, how we in this life, Muslims in this life, have to be witnesses, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us. We have to be witnesses in this world with integrity. Because you're going to face the bare bones reality, the absolute truth on the day of judgment. Everything is going to be audited. Everything that you said, everything that you did, everything that you didn't say and didn't do. There are no alternative versions of reality on that day. No narratives. And there's no moral relativism on that day. You understand? So if you construct an internal fiction, a private universe, where cause and effect can be defied or distorted, where you can repaint facts, where you're the arbiter of the truth, then you're denying the day of judgment. You are denying the day of judgment. Look, you know the story of Cain and Abel, right? Christians have that story. And so do Muslims. Qabil and Habil. So Cain offered a lackluster sacrifice, an offering, and it was rejected. But he spun a narrative that his offering was only rejected because God was unfairly biased against him and unfairly preferential to Abel, to Habil. Well, that's the story of the West. Because it was never about the material substance of Cain's offering. It was the deficiency of his intention, the deficiency of his sincerity. And he became envious of his brother, and he became angry at God, and he killed his brother in an act of envy and resentment. Well, that's literally the whole history of Western so-called civilization. Their history with the global South. That's the history of colonization. Envy and jealousy about the abundance of their resources in the global south, interpreted in the Western mind as an unfair preference by God, and then a centuries-long campaign of violence and extraction and acquisition and pillage and plunder out of resentment, out of jealousy, out of spite, and out of a total misunderstanding of the purpose of existence. Do you understand me? Because it's not like Europeans were the only ones on earth who were living in harsh conditions. It's not like they were the only ones who were precarious, whose survival was precarious, but they reacted to their conditions the way they did, and that's unique to them. It's peculiar to them. So you rejected the reality that you were living in on the basis of a wrong interpretation about it, because you felt that you were being unfairly deprived by God. And then you decided to act out. You decided to lash out and to prioritize material acquisition above and beyond anything and everything else, until morality and truth became afterthoughts. You see the chronology of this pathology in the Western mind? You formed this view that you can weave your own system of reality that makes anything and everything you do, anything and everything that you do to win. That is the definition of what is right and true and moral. But notice what this habit does to language. You know, words stop pointing to realities and they start serving your own appetites and urges and what you and your nefs. And any sort of precision in speech and any sort of fact checking is always treated as hostility or arrogance. Clarity is accused of being cruel. The aim of speech shifts from illumination to pacification and to justification. You can always tell when you're in that sort of a discourse environment, when every fact is greeted with deflection and evasion. You know, it's complicated. It's nuanced. There's many sides. I mean, of course, complexity exists, obviously, but complexity is not a permit to abandon the truth. Complexity should sharpen your honesty, not sabotage your honesty. I mean, what does this do to a person? Well, it splits you. You're forced to live in two different worlds at once. The real world that keeps intruding with consequences, and then the invented world of your own mind, of the Western mind, where the consequences are denied or pretended they either don't exist or pretend they're happening for other reasons. But your own nervous system knows the difference. Anxiety spikes because your soul is conscripted into a permanent cleanup operation, damage control operation. You have to seal up all the leaks in your alternative reality, patching up the holes in your fiction, explaining away the obvious. You're in a constant defensive posture. That's why so many people in the West are exhausted. It takes immense energy to keep the false world standing. You know, it can't bear the weight of the world, the real world. Your house of cards mentality, your house of cards worldview, your house of cards paradigm isn't strong enough to hold the weight of the real world, and it's being crushed. I mean, the cognitive dissonance alone, the cognitive dissonance is torture. People start crashing out. You see it all the time. And then, of course, you add to all this the fact that the West, and especially America, has deliberately, completely sabotaged people's thought processes, you know, their capacity for independent thought, for critical thought, and so on. Because again, you need that. You need that as a so-called civilization. You need people to be that way. You need uniformity. You don't want any leaks in the system. It's already hard enough to keep the leaks from flooding, from reality flooding through the already existing cracks in your system. You don't want people to themselves become leaks. You understand? So you need uniformity. So then people become predictable because everyone is programmed. Like, for example, in any given video that I do, and probably in response to this video, you'll see it in the comment section. You'll see the recitation of all the same trite arguments, the attempted rebuttals. And I'm sure that the people who are writing these comments actually believe that they thought of these comments, but they didn't. These are programmed responses. Like, for example, if the West is so bad, why does everyone want to come here? Or, yes, the West has done bad things, but everyone else has done the same. Well, you're using a computer, aren't you? You're using Western technology. Aren't you being a hypocrite? Or, my favorite, why are you wearing a suit and tie if you don't like the West? And of course, you got just the blanket dismissal. Oh, you just hate the West. You see what I mean? Truth doesn't matter. This is not honest engagement. The substance of the arguments that are made in the posts or in the videos that they're responding to are never acknowledged, never processed. There's just this reflexive deflection, diversion, misdirection, and so on. Any of these attempted program rebuttals can obviously easily be answered. They can easily be answered, but that would mean diverting off the path of the original point in the video and creating just busy work as a tactic of distraction. That's all this is. Cover up an actual issue, cover up an actual argument, cover up an actual point with a pile of non-issues, a pile of misdirections. And this whole process obscures and it covers up and it distracts and it enforces moral relativism or reality relativism. I mean, like conflating, for example, an actively ongoing Western genocide in Gaza with the alleged crime of hypocritically using a computer. It's absolute nonsense. What are you saying? You don't even know what you're saying. And another version of this is something that happened the other day on the Middle Nation Telegram discussion group. Okay, we had someone who decided to rant his outrage about the Israelis, how evil the Israelis are, how anyone even trying to deal with them within the framework of legality, well, they're just a fool. They're a coward. You know, he talked about how the Israelis are just wicked and how they steal children's organs and how all they want to do is to destroy Islam and so on and so forth. Okay. And he was basically inferring that the only proper way of dealing with them is what? Violent annihilation, I suppose. He didn't really have a point except to delegitimize the strategies that are being employed by necessity by the Arab states and by the Muslim world. This was all being said in response to the Israeli strike in Doha. Okay. This was an emotional outburst. Well, we don't do emotional outbursts in our discussion because that's self-indulgent. It's time wasting. You're literally putting yourself and your feelings at the center of everything, and I can't stand that. Stating the obvious, okay, is not analysis. Shock and outrage are not strategies. And performing your despair and your anger more loudly than anyone else does not make you more virtuous. And it does not mean that you feel it more than the rest of us. And it doesn't make you right in your conclusions. And so when this person got pushback, as inevitably he did, he immediately reverted to, well, that was hurtful. You're not being nice. You see the manipulation? They can't engage honestly. And of course, this person is American. Obviously, it goes without saying. Everyone in the discussion already knew that this was an American before he was identified as such, because he self-identified as such by his manner of discussion. I'm loud and I'm passionate and I'm histrionic in my outrage. And therefore, I'm wise. Therefore, I'm right. Therefore, my views should be respected. Because in the West, performance is everything. It trumps truth and reality. Performance is everything. No, this is dishonest. This is dishonest. It's a dishonest approach to discourse. I've said it many, many times. If you form and voice and argue your opinion, while it is not a knowledge-based opinion, it's not based on facts, and it's not based on any sound thinking, then you are identical to a liar, in my opinion. You are someone for whom the truth does not matter. So you won't even benefit by being told the truth. Because if you did care about the truth at all, you would have already researched facts. You would have already researched information before forming your opinion, much less before voicing it, and much less before arguing your opinion in public with other people. No, you don't care about the truth. You care about validation and you care about recognition. You care about being regarded as moral more than you care about being moral. And this is the essence of so-called Western civilization. Okay? Say what you mean and mean what you say. We all know that. We all understand that idea. But meaning what you say is not about feeling passionately about what you're saying. That's not what that means. No. Meaning what you say is about the soundness of what you are saying and that you are convinced of that. That you're saying what is true because you know it is true based on sound reasoning, not based on passion and emotion. Like I said, this is something that has been done to you. You have been deprived of honesty. And wallahi, it's a catastrophe. But this is something that has to be understood both by the Muslim world, by the people in the global south and so on, but also by Westerners themselves. Obviously, for us, for Muslims, and for people in the global south, we have to know that we cannot deal with you the way that we would deal with honest people. But for Westerners, you have to know this so that maybe you can actually become honest people. Again, I've explained it many times before, but I'm not just talking about lying. Understand me, I'm not just talking about lying. Because plenty of you don't deliberately lie, but you're still dishonest. You still cannot communicate with others in an honest manner. You can't stay on topic. You can't engage with the points being made. You can't restrain your impulse to deflect and to subject change, or to throw in false equivalencies, or to divert or evade, or start ad hominem attacks, or be contrarian for purely defensive tactical reasons. You can't stop yourself from cherry picking or relativizing or. You have a tremendous amount of rehabilitation that you have to do before you can even start being honest, I'm telling you. Because look, again, honesty is also about saying what you yourself think, what you yourself thought of, ideas and perspectives that you independently built in your own mind, and using expressions that are unique to you, unique to your own mind. And your society has almost completely destroyed your ability to do that. I mean, it's unwise for me to do this, for me to point this out, and I don't mean to offend anyone in my comment section. I don't mean to offend anyone who supports Middle Nation and who appreciates our content, but let's be honest. You can look at even the positive comments in my comment section, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Yes, as I always say it, is that getting someone who has an admirable character and boldness like Shaheed Bolsen is a walk in the park. It's a walk in the park because so many people do not have the courage and confidence to say things the way they should be said. The Western plans are not towards achieving equality, and that is what Shade Bolsen is trying to expose. All they do is to use tactics, tactful lies to skew developments in favor of their interests. So when you see Shahid on mic, they know that there's something serious he wants to talk about. And today he brings these lies that the Westerns, or rather the Westerners, have against other populace. So what is their plan? Their plan is to continue with their oppression. Their plan is to remain on top of the world through any means possible, the crafty means. So it's high time we tell our leaders, more so in Africa and the Middle East, it's high time their leaders know that the people who are suffering because of these missions or lies, the citizens, and they should take measures to protect the citizens from these Western crafty means of oppression. I saw what happened in Congo, and it's still happening, whereby there can never be peace because of the interest of the Americans. They want to exploit the resources, the gold resources that is vastly placed in Congo without proper compensation. Another example was Libya, whereby when the president tried to stop the Western lies and told the people the truth, he had to be eliminated. His interest was so much on the people and in the development of a united Africa, an Africa where its worth is felt by the people or the residents. But this did not augur well with the Americans and the Westerners in general. So they smeared him. They held campaigns that were meant to smear him as a dictator, someone who infringes the rights of the people. Yet he had a bigger interest for the continent. So this one tells you how the Western plan is, because they brought something that is so much digging a hole for the whole Africa and even the Middle East to some extent. This is the term democracy. It is a democracy of lies. It is a democracy of deceit. A democracy where you're not free to choose. It is defined as something that lets you make a free decision and free will. But this is not what they mean. They impose leaders on Africans and expect them to go to court, follow the due process, and they call it democracy. Yet, openly, this is someone that the people have not chosen. When you go to the courts, a lot is done, the deceit continues, and they impose puppets through these lies that they spread. Campaigns, they come in terms of aids, they come in terms of campaigns that they are helping the poor, yet they have a bigger interest that lies at the back of all these activities. So it is high time we know what Western countries hold for us, because if you don't realize that, then we are headed into big shit or oblivion. So I want you to tell me what you think about this issue. Hit our comment section and share your thought on this, because that is how we shape the conversation across the globe. And if you're watching us, I urge you to make a subscription. Just subscribe to our channel. Also, do not forget to like, share, and always tune in to this great channel. As I said, blacks are humans. Thank you, and may God bless you.